The hospital room where Michael was lying looked typical: white walls, a wide window overlooking the courtyard, and 4 dripping medicine, and a monitor recording the boy's heart rate. Next to the bed was a table with a stack of comic books, a plastic cup of water, and a half-eaten piece of cookie. The air in the room was filled with a mixture of sterility and the faint smell of oranges. One of the doctors had recently eaten the fruit. Michael was pale, his skin thin, almost transparent, but his eyes were shining. Light blue, full of life and curiosity. There was a light fuzz on his head, his hair had almost disappeared after chemotherapy, but he did not look sad. Even in such a situation, he remained cheerful, like a real fighter. He was lying on the bed, half sitting, covered with a light blanket with an image of Spider-Man. He was holding a small gaming console in his hands and was pressing something on the screen with concentration. At that moment, the door to the ward creaked quietly. The boy looked up, and froze. Jason Statham was standing in the doorway. "Hi, Michael," he said calmly, closing the door behind him. The boy blinked. Then again. He slowly sat up, dropping the console right on the bed. What? He swallowed. Is this really you? Jason smiled with the corner of his lips, put his hands in the pockets of his leather jacket and slightly tilted his head to the side. "At least this morning I was definitely myself. I hope nothing has changed." Michael was still looking at him, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "Holy shit. Is this a prank?" He looked around, as if looking for hidden cameras. "No, man, this is not a joke." Jason took a couple of steps forward and sat down on a chair next to the bed. "I heard you were a fan of mine, so I thought, why not come see me?" The boy's lips parted slightly. He looked at the actor in shock, then looked down at his skinny hands, as if checking if he was asleep. "Holy shit," he repeated with his lips alone, then took a deep breath. You're Jason Statham. The real deal." "Well, unless someone stole my looks," the actor chuckled. Michael blinked rapidly, then nervously ran his hand over his face. "Oh, my. You even talk like you do in the movies." "That's what I always say," Jason shrugged. "Damn, that's so cool." The boy literally jumped up, but then wilted, feeling a little dizzy. Jason leaned forward slightly, looking at him carefully. "Are you okay?" Yeah, just, didn't expect it." Michael nodded quickly. Jason looked at him searchingly. "You know, kid, I think you're stronger than you look." "Well, I'm trying," Michael smiled slightly. "But, of course, if I knew you were coming, I would have prepared better." "You're already good." Jason nodded towards the comics. "I see you like superheroes." "Yeah. But you're cooler than any superhero." "Really?" "Well, yeah." The boy's eyes sparkled. "Superheroes are comics, and you're real. You're invulnerable, you fight like a ninja, and you always beat the bad guys." "Well, in the movies it's easier than in real life," Jason grinned. Michael shook his head. "Oh, come on. You could do it in real life." Jason pretended to think about it, then grinned. "Well, maybe. But you know, real heroes look a little different in real life." The boy looked at him questioningly. "Like you, for example," Jason added. Michael's eyes widened. "What? You're not giving up, are you?" The boy froze for a second, then nodded quietly. "Then you're a hero. A real one." Michael swallowed, then quickly rubbed his eyes with his hand. "Wow. No one's ever said that to me before." "Now you have," Jason nodded. The boy was silent for a moment, then exhaled slowly. "I still can't believe this is happening." "Well, since I'm here," Jason leaned forward, "maybe we should chat. You and I have plenty of time." "Yeah. Of course." Michael nodded vigorously, the smile returning to his face. And they started talking. About movies, about fights, about cars, about Jason's first time in an action movie. The boy laughed, told about his favorite scenes and even tried to repeat a couple of hand movements, imitating a fight. The room was warm. It may have been a gray day outside, but it was light inside. Dear viewer, I think it's time to subscribe, like and click the bell, so you'll let me know if you like my stories and you'll always be the first to know when new videos are released. I took 5 seconds of your time, I apologize, you can continue watching. Jason Statham settled into his chair, steepling his fingers, and looked at Michael with a slight smile. So, do you want to hear a story? Sure, the boy responded immediately, eagerly settling into the bed. Will it be something cool? Yeah, Jason nodded slightly. I don't know how cool, though. It's not about fights or cars. Then what about? Jason rubbed his chin thoughtfully, looking out the window. It happened many years ago, when I was still young, he began. I wasn't famous then. I was just trying my hand at acting, and before that I worked in London wherever I could, selling jewelry on the street, working part-time in clubs. One day after filming, I went to an old pub in Soho. A pub? Michael asked. Well, it's a place where people drink beer and talk. Oh, like a bar. Exactly. Jason smiled and looked at the boy again. Anyway, I went there late at night. It was cold, drizzling, the streets were glistening with water. Inside the pub there was a smell of tobacco, wood, and something fried. The lights were dim, and there was an old man sitting by the fireplace. So. He caught my attention right away. Tall, broad-backed, in an old raincoat. He looked about 70, but there was something in his eyes, like he'd been through more than anyone in this room. Was he sad? No, quite the opposite. Jason chuckled. He looked peaceful. Like nothing could surprise him anymore. The boy listened, holding his breath. I sat down at the bar and ordered some tea. And this old man suddenly turned to me and said, "You look like you have 1,000 questions in your head, man." Did you? Sure. Jason shrugged. I didn't know where I was going then. I'd done a couple of movies, but I wasn't sure if I could do it. And what did he say? He invited me to his table. I sat down and we started talking. It turned out he was a former military man. He'd served in the special forces. He'd been in hot spots. He'd seen his friends die. Michael tensed up, listening carefully to every word. I asked him, "How do you live with it? How do you cope?" And he looked at me and said, "Every time death came close, I asked myself, did I do everything right? Did I live honestly, help people, love as best I could?" Wow. Michael whispered. And then I understood. Jason nodded. It doesn't matter how much time you have. It matters how you spend it. The room went silent. Michael took a slow breath. He knew he was going to die. Yes. He had cancer. He had a few months left. And he was still calm. Yes. Because he had already done everything he wanted. The boy was silent. Then he slowly ran his hand over the blanket, thinking. And you? He asked suddenly. Are you afraid of death? Jason looked at him carefully. No, kid. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of not having time to do something. Michael's eyes suddenly sparkled. He blinked quickly, but a single tear still rolled down his cheek. So, it's not when it's over, but what happens before that? Exactly, Jason said softly. The boy sobbed and clenched his fist. Then I want to do it right, too. Jason smiled. That's the right way to say it, kid. Jason leaned back in his chair and slapped his hands on his knees. Okay, kid, I think it's time to change the tone. You want to hear something cool? Michael quickly wiped away a tear from their previous conversation and nodded vigorously. Sure. Then listen. Jason leaned closer and smiled conspiratorially. I'm going to tell you what my new movie is about. Michael's eyes lit up. Really? An official spoiler? Almost. But just the beginning. Jason held up a finger. You'll find out the rest when you go to the cinema. Michael chuckled. Okay, we're done. Great. So picture this, darkness. The camera slowly rises over London at night. Rain patters on the rooftops. Lights glow in the distance, the streets are deserted, cars leave long streaks of light on the wet asphalt. Cool. Michael whispered, already imagining this picture. And then the camera stops. There's a man standing on the roof of one of the skyscrapers. Jason paused. In a black cloak, with a hood. His face is in shadow. He looks down, to where the motorcade has stopped in the courtyard of an elite club. And then what? A man in an expensive suit gets out of the car. Security surrounds him, all serious, each with a gun under his coat. But this guy, he's not just a big shot. He's a target. Wow. And now the most interesting part. Jason leaned forward. The man on the roof, our main character, takes out his phone and dials a number. And this big shot down below hears the ringing. He takes out his cell phone, looks at the screen and sees one word, run. Wow. Michael even stood up. Everything happens very quickly from here. While the guards are trying to figure out what's going on, our hero takes a step forward, and jumps down. What do you mean? Right off the roof. Free fall, 30 stories. And he survives? Of course. Jason grinned. Because he times it perfectly and falls right onto the tarpaulin of a truck that's driving by. Holy shit. He bounces off, rolls across the roof of the car, lands on the sidewalk, and there's panic all around. People are screaming, the guards are drawing their guns, but he doesn't get confused. And then what? Well, you'll find out in the theater. Oh, come on. Michael laughed. That's not fair. It's all fair, man. Jason grinned. The main thing is to keep the audience interested. How did they film that jump? Did you really jump? Oh, this is where it gets fun. Jason rolled his eyes. Look, I'm used to stunts, yeah, but sometimes the writers just want to kill me on purpose. What do you mean? Well, there was a scene where I had to jump over a moving train. They were like, don't worry, it's all calculated. I was like, are you sure? They were like, well, 90%. Huh, what? I was like, 10% for what? They looked at me and said nothing. Michael burst out laughing. So what did you do? Well, what else could I do? I jumped, of course. How? Well, I'm sitting here with you, so it's okay. Jason winked. That's awesome, Michael sighed dreamily. I wish I could see it all on set. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll make movies yourself. That would be cool, the boy smiled. Thanks for telling me. Now I'll definitely wait for the premiere. That's great. That means you have another reason not to give up. After Jason left, Michael lay for a long time, staring at the ceiling. The room was silent. Only the muffled hum of the machines and the occasional footsteps of the nurses outside the door reminded him that the world was still moving. He sat up, listening to his body. Something had changed. Not all at once, not suddenly, but it had changed. All his life, he had felt the disease stealing his strength. Slowly, day after day, like raindrops washing away an old pavement. And now he felt something inside him shift. As if a small mechanism that had been stuck in one position all this time had suddenly started moving again. Michael took a deep breath. It doesn't matter how much time you have. It matters how you live it. He closed his eyes. Jason said it simply, as if stating a fact. But the more he thought about these words, the more they grew in his head, like a tree putting down roots. He remembered how afraid he used to be. Afraid of the next test, afraid of bad news, afraid that one day he would fall asleep and never wake up. This fear was like a shadow following him, not allowing him to move forward. And now the fear has retreated. And I'm still alive, he muttered under his breath. He even grinned. I'm alive, damn it. He wanted to jump up, run out of the room, shout across the hallway, hey! I'm still here. But he just sat up in bed, clutching the blanket in his hands. He realized that he would no longer wait for death. He realized that no one would tell him how much time he had left. Not the doctors, not his mother, not his friends. Not even he himself knew. He knew only one thing. That he was not giving up. And he decided to live. To live so that one day, when he was an old man with a broad back, sitting by the fire in an old pub, he could calmly say to someone, I did everything I wanted to do. The doctors watched him with cautious skepticism over the next few weeks. I don't know what happened, said the attending physician, looking with disbelief at the latest tests. But something has definitely changed. In what sense? Michael's mother asked worriedly. The doctor sighed. I mean, the numbers are going up. Where they should be worse, they're getting better. It's medically inexplicable. But Michael knew. It wasn't a miracle. It was his decision. He kept fighting. He started going out into the hospital garden, walking, even exercising a little. He asked the nurses to bring him books on cinematography. Have you decided to become a director? One of the doctors once joked. Michael just smiled mysteriously. 3 months had passed. He stood in front of the mirror, looking at his reflection. His skin had become pinker, his eyes were shining. His hair had started to grow, and now he had a short, light stubble. He looked healthy. The latest tests confirmed remission. The disease had retreated. The day he left the hospital, the world seemed different to him. The air was cleaner, the sky was higher. He took a deep breath, felt his lungs fill with oxygen, and laughed. He was living again. And he knew exactly what his first film would be.